Shake it, quake it, and get your tickets now at hennepinarts.org before the mummies vanish. Again, that's hennepinarts.org.
Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations, exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information.
With your AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lilia. Tonight, clear with a low of 69, then Tuesday, sunshine with a high of 89. Maverick's Real Roast Beef serves up the best roast beef sandwiches in town, but don't miss their other great offerings like chicken, fish, Philly steak, and more. Mavericks is located on Lexington Avenue in Roseville, 1 mile south of Highway 36. Check them out at mavericksbeef.com.
Portions of the following program may be pre-recorded.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story. This is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm really excited. We had a great weekend, getting back into everything right now, and I just can't wait to get into our subject tonight. We're going to just get right into it. We've had author Tim Rayborn on a few times before talking about light and airy subjects such as a history of the end of the world, a scary book of Christmas lore, Northern mythology. Why not keep this tradition alive here tonight, as we are talking tonight about Tim's newest book, The Scary Book of Fairy Tales. And I think this is an absolutely wonderful topic for tonight. Tim, first of all, welcome to the show. It's great to have you back as always.
Thanks. No, I always enjoy coming on. It's like fourth time now, I think. Yeah, I really enjoy it.
It really is. It's really great. Did the book come out? Did it come out today?
It was a couple weeks ago, actually, Tuesday the 2nd. So yeah,
just the 2nd.
A week ago. Yeah, it was just published.
Still hot off the press.
Pretty much. Yeah, that hurt holding it up like this, actually. So I had to put it down.
It's so hot off the press.
Yeah.
And thank you for putting yourself in danger like that for us.
Yeah,
really appreciate
anything
it.
for art, whatever.
Anything for art, indeed. Like we said, the book is called The Scary Book of Fairy Tales, and going through it, first of all, once again, it is an absolutely beautiful book. It looks fantastic. You're going through a ton of fairy tales. I'm going to talk about this here as the time goes on over here. But one of the things that really got my attention looking through it are the art that's in it. Is the art in that, is that produced just for your book, or?
Yeah. The publisher actually works with various artists for their books, and all three of these books have been done by the same artist. His name is Neil Evans. He's a Scottish artist, and he does all sorts of book illustration and stuff, but he's been the perfect partner for this, because what I do is, like, I finish up I come up with the initial when they commission these books, I come up with, usually there's 50 stories or 50 entries or whatever, and I come up with the initial list of what I think I'm going to do, and then we send that off to him with a summary of what each one is about, and he starts working on sketches, and and then we kind of go back and forth until we decide on the exact ones, and then they send them all to me to make sure that they actually, in this case, to make sure that they actually match the stories perfectly, and all that was done, and we had a few tweaks and changes, and we work pretty closely together, but I don't usually see the completed versions until a couple of weeks before the book is published, and they always blow me away. His stuff's just amazing. So yeah,
this stuff is just amazing, and I want to let me do this real fast. If is it okay if I have one up on my browser? Is it okay if I bring it up on screen?
Yeah.
Because I really think, and first of all, we live in a time of people wanting, it feels like people wanting less and less of physical media of different types. And I don't agree with that, by the way, but that's what I always feel like people are kind of getting at here.
Yeah.
But the thing is this is a perfect time that people could make this really, not do a whole lot and put a lot of extra effort in here.
Yeah.
But this is absolutely beautiful. This is for Snow White.
Snow White, yes, indeed.
And it's one of those things that this is really wonderful. I just absolutely love this. And this is throughout the whole book. Not this image. I mean,
he excels at drawing amazing sort of monsters and ghosts and creatures, and there's some fabulous ones in this book. So yeah,
absolutely. So I really just wanted to take a moment there and make sure that everyone can kind of see that. Now, here's the thing: we have Wade in the comments, and I feel like that I might have moved us a little too quickly here because, like Wade says, are the basis of the contents of the subject stories based on true incidents. Why don't we back up and explain what the book is about?
Sure, of course. Well, as the title kind of suggests, it takes a lot of the fairy tales and folk tales that we know from childhood and a lot that we don't know, and looks at the original versions of them. I mean, most of us have grown up with things like Disney cartoons and such, of stories like Snow White, Cinderella, those sorts of things, Hansel and Gretel, and they're beloved children's stories. But the originals, which were collected by the Brothers Grimm in the early 19th century from all around the Western Germany, were very old folk tales that were decidedly darker and more sinister. And what I've done is to go back to those, to look at the ones that they published. And there's been many translations of those over the centuries as well. But they're decidedly darker and more violent. It's not only Grimm's fairy tales. I also have stories from other countries. There's things from Scandinavia. There's some stories by Hans Christian Andersen. I have folk tales from Africa, from Mongolia, from all sorts of, from Japan. So I wanted to kind of look at the world collection of them. It centers on the Grimm fairy tales and on Germany and Europe, but there are things elsewhere. These stories, they obviously, there are people that literally devote their entire careers to these. I know people who are folklorists, and they've written PhDs on folklore, and they look at connections. I know people will do things like they will look at the connections. They may look at the story of Cinderella, and they also see that there's a story from Persia or India that has very similar kinds of motifs and ideas, and it suggests that there's a very ancient common origin for a lot of these stories. So yeah, it's a whole world unto itself. Being a folklorist is a whole academic profession unto itself. But what I wanted to do is just, when my publisher commissioned this from me, I wanted to just collect some of the more famous stories, such as Snow White, Cinderella, Hansel and Gretel, various others like that. What's her name? I'm completely blanking now. The Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I had the Three Bears in my mind, but I couldn't remember. And but look at the originals and see how much more interesting they were and darker and sinister. And then I, not rewrote, but just adapted them in short form to a page or a page and a half, 2 pages for this book. Just retelling them in those forms so that they're decidedly much more PG, borderline R-rated, PG-13, borderline R-rated. They're definitely not for young children. And yet we say that now, but these stories probably were told to children in the past. And we've talked about this before when I was on for the Scary Christmas books. Like, these stories represented, in many ways, they were teaching things for people who grew up in a world that was much more cognizant of death and the other and the outside, and the forest was dangerous and your village was the safe place. So a lot of these were meant almost as warning tales to children. Don't go into the forest alone. because there's a witch there that might boil you up and eat you. What that really meant is you could get lost, or there might be wolves, or there might be predators or something. So it was a way of keeping children safe by basically scaring the hell out of them at a young age with these stories that are pretty awful and kind of traumatic. And I think there was a lot less of the sense that children needed to be sheltered and kept safe from things like that, because the realities of the world were harsher then, so they needed to face up to those at the young age. So they would repeat these fantastical tales to both adults and children as both entertainment, but also as kind of like out of a morbid fascination, and also a warning, a teaching, be careful, this is what might happen to you if you do that.
Well, and that's the thing too that I find very interesting. It's kind of like a what we'd call like almost like a modern day PSA. Where it's like showing like little kids who run out in front of a moving car or something like this. Yeah. Be careful,
They used to do, I don't know if you remember, but they used to do these things. And I know that Mystery Science Theater 3000, the parody show, used to have these on. They would do these educational videos from the 1950s that were about things like that. And of course, the little three shadows down there would mock them mercilessly. But there were things that were shown in classrooms, and they were often kind of horrible. Like, there were people getting hit by trains or blinded by sparks or something. They showed these to school kids all over the United States in the 1950s and 60s as like warnings to be. So it's really not all that different. Those were set in a much more in the real world, quote unquote, but they were fables. They were stories, hypotheticals, and it is interesting that there is actually a connection. You could think of them almost in that way.
It is really interesting, and I'm just going to touch on this in a second. We're going to move on. We had author Richard Estep on last week, and he's based in the UK. You and I have talked about the UK quite a bit, and back in the day, they had really scary PSAs. Over here, it's just kind of like, it's kind of implied that this kid's might get hit by a car. Meanwhile, in the UK, they're showing PSAs of a kid rolling up on a hood. It's hardcore.
Absolutely. And they were still, there's even still in the UK, there's still some commercials like that are pretty tough, like drunk driving things where they have people like lying covered in blood on the asphalt. These things are shown on television still, it's the kind of thing, a don't drink and drive kind of thing. And you may remember, when you took your driver's ed when you were 16, they showed videos of actual car accidents and what had happened to people as a way of trying to scare kids. And you had to get parental permission to view those parts of it. But it was like you'd see these wrecks, on the things and blood all over the place and whatever. It's really not that different. It's perhaps arguably more practical and less fantastical, but they used what they had at the time. In 18th century Germany, it was not a completely different kind of thing.
So we've established that these are, back in the day PSAs, and I think we also established that you wrote this book because you hate Disney. So
no, I don't hate Disney at all. I think Disney's wonderful. But, these are the original stories. And I think people really are I think most people are aware of the fact that the Disney stories and other modern adaptations are a little bit sanitized, but I don't think a lot of people necessarily know the originals unless they've read that. Even the Grimm's fairy tale books that you can get in the store are often for children. So they've been very carefully kind of sanitized and edited, and they're not the originals that they've been made appropriate for, like, say, the 6 to 8 year olds, who might be listening to them and such. So, yeah.
Now, I don't have kids, so my barometer, because my barometer is really off here. I was going to ask you, do you think it's wrong that those books had been edited, even like as supposed to be the real version of the fairy tales, but it's been softened for children? Do you think they should have left it as is?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I'm not a child psychologist by any means. I think that there's an age when it's appropriate for that. I think these days, like very small children, 5, 6, 7 years old, don't need the originals. But I think by the time they're, 10, 11, they're more than capable of handling those. So that would be my safe answer.
No, and it's right. It's who's to say, Joshua says all stories have a meaning. And of course, let's see here. All stories have a meaning. It's how we perceive them over time throughout history and in our lifetime. Now, so the question I have, Tim, you have all of these stories from all around the world. What is the time lapse on this? Is it like stories that have been around between the earliest and the most latest that you include in the book, like a few hundred years, or is it longer than that?
Yeah, well, some of them we know definitely. Well, we know that, for instance, the Grimm brothers wrote theirs down in the early 19th century. They were folklorists and historians, and they collected in the Black Forest area and other places in what's now Western Germany. They collected a lot of these. Some of those stories are probably very old and may date to the Middle Ages, some versions of them. And folklorists have delved into older stories that were written down and found similarities, and some might be older than that. When you get into other places, such as in Africa or Mongolia, we have no idea how old they are. They could be 100 years old, they could be 900 years old. We don't really know. So it's I say the at least, I'd allow at least 500 to 700 years for some of these, if not more. So, and some of them are more demonstrably written down later, and a few of them, like I've included stories by Hans Christian Andersen, who wrote The Little Mermaid, and he he lived in the mid-19th century, and he invented his own stories, kind of loosely based on Danish folklore, but they were his own stories, so those have a definitive, And there's other examples of that, even like the Goldilocks story. There's versions of it. The earliest versions I think we know of date from about the 18th century, and the one that I have in this book is really more from the early 19th century. So yeah, they may have just been invented by those authors at that time.
It's also really interesting, as you point out, that this is a lot of these stories probably have been verbally passed down over generations, opposed to, like you said, opposed to be written, and that's something that always frightens me in a sense, because it just seems impossible, but that's what it was. And for people who don't realize that that's what the Old Testament and the Bible was, it was all
Homer, the Odyssey and the Iliad were passed down verbally for a long time before they were written down. So we can't, when you get into that kind of study, you can't even talk about what the original was, because the original changes with every telling. And, it's very possible that like Beowulf was the same, and some of these other epics as well. The importance is retaining the essence of the story, not getting every detail right. So those would have changed from generation to generation, almost certainly. And there would have been different versions of them as well. And there are multiple versions of some of these old fairy tales as well. And folklorists will delve into this. They'll say, like, this one from Western Germany has these elements, but the same story from Switzerland, the witch doesn't put the child in a pot, she puts him in an oven or something. So you will find variants even within a relatively small geographical area. You'll find that those things change.
Well, and I can imagine that there was never any intention or thought that these stories would be reaching around the world, that these were all localized stories for
Absolutely. They weren't for posterity, they were for here and now, the here and now that was important there and then.
Isn't that something? That's incredible. Why don't we go ahead and do this? A couple things I want to do here. First of all, folks, I'm giving away tickets tonight for the Twins game tomorrow against the Yankees. If you're interested in getting tickets from me to go tomorrow, send me an email, comment at ghostboxradio.com. Send me an email. I was gonna say put your email address on there, but if you're sending me an email, I can figure it out. I'm not that dumb. And we'll set you up with tickets. When we come back, it's going to be really pretty cool, actually, as Tim is going to do some readings from the book. And I always enjoy that, because you really get an idea of what the book is about. The book, once again, is called Scary Book of Fairy Tales. Our author guest tonight is Tim Rayborn. We have a lot to get to. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches. How's that all about? Turkey, bacon, avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. Tim, I think you broke my system with your fairy tales. I think that's what's going on here. I don't know.
I heard the ad start 3 times, and it's
You know what? That's interesting. I didn't hear it at all.
Oh, okay. I did hear it start, and then it would fade out, and then it started over, and that happened 3 times.
I don't know. That's just how it goes. That's okay, because you know what that means? It means more Tim Rayborn.
Oh, I don't know if that's a good thing.
Well, we'll let history decide if this is a good thing or not. And Once again, the book is called The Scary Book of Fairy Tales. What a fantastic subject. You can get it at all bookstores. You can also go to your local bookstore and order it in. You can also go to GhostBox Book Club. There's an Amazon affiliated link that helps the show directly. Maybe we're able to play commercials if we have people buy it through there, that the money can come back and we can repair our commercials. Who knows what's going on? Tim,
magic.
Yeah, right, exactly. Through the power of Marconi, we are unable to give you commercials tonight. So, with that being said, one of the questions I wanted to ask you about the book and whatnot, and was kind of getting to also, is you have all these stories from all around the world. How on earth do you curate something like that? I mean, where do you even start to? I mean, I'm sure it's easy to be like, okay, Hans Christian Andersen,
Sure.
Brothers Grimm. We know that these sort of things are going to be essential, but then to open beyond that, how do you get there?
I mean, sure, like the original Grimm's stories are all available online in translation, the originals, the uncensored versions. Most of Hans Christian Andersen's works are as well. Anything that's from that time is public domain and readily available. I have some books as well that I also research, and I do research on folktales from around the world. There's a bunch of books and things, but I just read through a lot of them and try to find the ones that I think are the best. Some of them are quite long and they ramble, but I like the story, so it's like, how can I condense this down to keep the essence of the story? Obviously, there's a heavy weight toward Grimm. The first, I think, 15 or so are Grimm stories, and then I start spreading it out from there to other European things, and then further out to other parts of the world. So it was just a kind of methodical. I started with the Grimm things because those were the easiest and most obvious, but I didn't want to only do those. That would have been boring. So I picked a lot of the most popular ones: Snow White, Cinderella, all of those things that everybody knows, because I thought it would be fun to put those in. There's a Little Red Riding Hood in here. There's the original version of that. There's the Goldilocks. There's a whole bunch of those. I put in a couple of Hans Christian Andersen stories, and I tried to pick things, a mixture of like familiar and unknown. I put in a bunch of Grimm stories that aren't known at all, like nobody's ever heard of, and you'll never see Disney movies being made of them. So it's sometimes I choose more than I need, and then kind of pick, from there what seems the best. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. Is there, out of the stuff that you had known, and maybe you probably are pretty well versed with all of them because you're pretty well read, but was there anything even out of the stuff that you known, after kind of going back through stuff, that might have like surprised you a little bit?
Some of the Grimm ones are shockingly violent. There's like some really interesting things with those, but there's also some of the things from later times, or not later, but necessarily from different sources, that have just like horrible things about people, getting decapitated, getting their hands cut off, and all this sort of stuff. The Hans Christian Andersen stories are terrible. The Red Shoes by Hans Christian Andersen is pretty awful. So there's a lot of gore and dismemberment and violence and, all those kinds of things.
So remember, kids, stay away from knives, right? I mean, that's
yeah.
That's and then that you, where do you even begin to pick up like the stuff in the other countries and stuff? I mean, and was there a vetting process that you could be like, okay, I can do some of this for like a second volume? I'm sure there's enough for a second.
There could be, if they wanted one. I'm sure I could do that. That wasn't really, I think, it's like, that's always an interesting question, is what goes into a book like this and what doesn't, and I tried to pick the ones that I thought were either the most violent or at least the most interesting, things that people wouldn't necessarily have heard of before. I wanted to put a bunch of those in there, including, like I say, Grimm stories. There's a bunch of those that people have some of them are just like borderline completely absurd. They're just really weird and odd, and they would never be adapted as films or anything, because they're just too strange. They're just kind of these weird stream of consciousness things that are really odd. So they run the whole gamut of like pretty mainstream stories to things that are very strange. I tried to pick stuff. I wanted a small selection of things that everybody knows, just to give an interesting perspective on how different they are, because a lot of times the stories aren't all that different from what we know, but it's the endings or it's other things that happen in them that sort of take them off they fork off onto a different path into a much darker place. And then after that, I just wanted to pick out truly unique things, like stories I'd never read before that I thought were interesting. Like, oh, this is cool. I like this. So it was kind of like trying to do a balancing act, about 50-50 of like stuff and things you've never heard of before, things you think but you don't know the whole story, and then other things that you've never heard of at all. all. So yeah.
So you have some stuff to read for us tonight.
Sure.
Where would you like to start?
Well, let's see. I got my book here. Switch out my my standard glasses for my reading glasses. This is always a ritual with me. I have to do.
I wasn't sure if it was your Hans Christian Andersen glasses for your Brothers Grimm glasses. I didn't know. I
could have different ones. Yeah, I could have like little wireframed ones. Yeah. Like, let's see. I've earmarked a bunch of them in here. Would you like to hear the original Goldilocks? That's an interesting story.
I would very much like to hear. I hope it ends the way I think it. That I would expect it to end.
It doesn't. So the interesting thing about this story is that it's not a young girl named Goldilocks. It's an old woman. And that's the thing. So it's like complete. And yet this comes from an English writer named Robert Southey in 1839. And this is one of the earlier versions that we actually have of this. So I will tell you the story. It's a page and a half. So it won't take long, but it gives you an example of the kind of things that these were in books for children at the time. Victorian children were reading these for their entertainment and edification, apparently. Once 3 bears dwelled in a fine house in the middle of the woods. They were quite comfortable and would go out for walks, after which they would return and eat, smoke, and talk to each other. This image of like bears with cigars or something. One bear was large, another of medium size, and the third was quite small. They would eat their porridge from pots, a large one for the biggest bear, a middle-sized one for the next bear, and a small pot for the littlest bear. They each had a chair as well, each one befitting their sizes, and of course, each had their own bed, which matched their sizes as well. One morning, as they served their porridge, they found that it was far too hot, and having burned their tongues on hot porridge before, they decided to go for a pleasant walk in the woods and let it cool for a bit. It happened that while they were gone, an old woman by the name of Silverlocks was wandering in the woods and came upon the bear's house. Curious, she looked through the window and the keyhole and then lifted the latch to the front door. Finding it unlocked, she crept inside. She found the porridge pots and decided to sample them. The bears were kind, and if she had just waited until they came home, they might have shared some with her. But she was greedy and helped herself. She tried the porridge from the largest pot, but it was far too hot, and she swore and spat it out. The porridge in the second was too cold and not to her liking, but the porridge in the smallest pot was just right, so she ate it all. She next went to their chairs and found that the largest chair was too hard, while the middle chair was too soft, but the smallest of the 3 was just right. And so she stayed there for some time and began to nod off, but her weight was too much for the chair and it broke underneath her. She swore and went upstairs. Finding the 3 beds, the first 2 were not to her liking, but the smallest felt just right. Thus she lay down in it and fell asleep. A short time passed, and the 3 bears came home to find their door open. Going to the table, they saw their porridge pots. "Somebody at my porridge pot has been," shouted the largest bear. The medium bear did the same. The little bear whispered the same and saw that the porridge was all gone. They went to their chairs. "Somebody in my chair has sat," the great bear proclaimed, as did the middle bear, while the smallest said the same, but saw that the chair was broken. Going upstairs, they saw that their beds had been disturbed. "Someone's been lying in my bed," yelled the big bear, while the next one yelled the same. "Someone's been lying in my bed," the littlest declared, "and here she's lying still." They drew close, saw the old woman slumbering away. Hearing them approach, she awoke and shrieked to see 3 bears glaring at her. She then ran to the window and jumped out. She fell to the ground, broke her neck, and died.
I'm sorry. First of all, it's like a version of the story that we know, but like from Wish. It's not even Goldilocks, it's Silverlocks.
Silverlocks. One down. You downgraded one level.
Like Plastic Locks comes around later and checks it all out.
Tinsel Locks or something.
Well, but of course it has to be a horrible ending where she dies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm trying to remember, in the version that we have become accustomed to, does it end with her getting along with them, or does she kind of run out?
I think she just runs away. The message is all of those is, don't steal, don't take what's not yours, wait for charity to be given, or ask, before taking, is really, that's the message. It's just that this was a more brutal version of that story. So, and I think the point being, someone her age should know better. You can almost expect a child to make that mistake, but someone who's an old woman, they even say she's a greedy old woman, and it's like, don't become that person in your old age is the message here.
And I feel like that she is shocked that bears own a house.
Yes, yeah, and drink and smoke and eat porridge.
Well, and that's the part I really like. There's a like, I think Celestial Seasonings does a tea called
Sleepy Time.
Yeah, Sleepy Time with the bears in pajamas.
Yes,
and it's much more agreeable than the toilet paper commercials with bears with toilet paper on their butt.
I never really got that one. No. The artist, actually, Neil Evans, did a wonderful drawing of it. You can see here's the bears glaring at the old woman who's asleep. You can see they're very very unhappy, and then they're about to pounce on her, and there she is sleeping, not even noticing. So
in Silverlocks, there she there doesn't actually seem to be anything redeeming about her.
No, that's it. She's kind of a there often are these kinds of characters. They're just sort of despicable people that deserve what they get, and that's often you're not supposed to sympathize with them. It's a don't be like them. The main character is often the person you're not supposed to emulate. They're not a role model.
Do you have any idea when this story got softened, and that with the introduction of, instead of an old lady, this younger girl?
I think this one in particular was pretty soon afterwards, but 1850s, 1860s, there was a version called Goldilocks that somebody sanitized, and probably some Victorian writer thinking, well, we could make a more appropriate for children version of this. So that was very much a preoccupation with some writers at the time, is how do we make these kinds of things a little more sanitized. So it was pretty soon after this one, I believe.
That is really cool, actually. To hear the original version. Yeah.
It's one of the earlier versions we have anyway. And there are versions from the 18th century that have similar types of stories, but this one was, so he might have heard it from like a French folk tale or something, and then wrote down his own version of it.
Yeah, no, that is really cool. Now, do you have anything, another one that you'd like to read for us?
Sure, I love this one. Let me find it. It is an old Yorkshire fairy tale called, I believe it's this one, yes. Man, this is more like a film by Rob Zombie or something like that. This is a folk tale from Yorkshire, Northern England. It's called The Satin Frock. And again, you would think, oh, that's going to be nice. It's about a little girl in her nice satin shirt, and isn't that sweet? Sure. Once there was a little girl named Mary. She had a fine satin frock, but her mother gave her a stern warning. If Mary got it dirty, her mother would kill her. It happened one day that Mary was out for a walk when a herd of cows came wandering by. Their hooves kicked up some mud, which splashed on Mary's satin frock. She sat down on a nearby doorstep and started to cry. The woman who lived in the house heard her and came out to see what troubled her. Mary told her about the dirty frock and what would happen to her if she went home. The woman took pity on her and brought her inside, where she washed the frock and dried it. She then sent Mary on her way, telling her to be careful not to get it dirty again. As Mary walked along a lane on the way home, a horse came trotting by and splashed her frock with mud again. But now Mary was nowhere near anyone who could help her, and she had no choice except to go home. When she got there, she confessed to her mother what had happened. She flew into a rage and dragged Mary into the cellar, where she cut off her head and hung it up on the wall. That evening, Mary's father came home and asked where she was. The mother lied and told him that Mary had gone to stay with her grandmother for the night, and this satisfied him. Later that night, at bedtime, he decided to fetch some sticks from the cellar in order to make a fire. "No, let me," the mother said. "No, I will do it," he insisted, and she could not persuade him to let her go down to the cellar instead. When he arrived there, he saw Mary's head on the wall. After he came back up, he asked her about it. "Oh, it is a sheep's head," Mary's mother lied. "Tomorrow I will make some broth for our dinner." And she did just that, serving a broth made from Mary's head. The father sampled some and said, "It's a nice broth," as it is a nice broth, he said as he slurped up some in his spoon. "But oddly, it tastes like our Mary." After he said this, she became very frightened, knowing that she couldn't hide the truth from him any longer. And indeed, when he discovered what she had done to Mary, he dragged her into the cellar and killed her. The end.
I mean, I'm speechless. I mean, there's a lot of questions. I mean, out of a story that is so bizarre, and that's a nice way of putting it. How does he know what our Mary tastes like?
Yeah. Who knows?
I mean,
that in of itself is weird and disturbing. Yes.
I mean, and that's just one small bit of disturbing compared to everything else that's disturbing.
Right.
When she said at the beginning, if you get that dirty, I'm going to kill you. It's like, well, she's dead. Isn't she?
Yeah. You kind of already know. Even though she's the biological mother, she has kind of the wicked stepmother sort of vibe in this as well, like the evil, the mother that hates her child already. It's like a motif that you find in these kinds of things, except here she happens to be the mother. So, yeah.
Joanne says warped. I love it.
Yeah.
God. And of course, Nancy has commentary. Obviously, the husband wasn't related to mine. He had sent me down to the cellar.
And he would have gotten away with it then. So
they would have gotten away with it. So, these things are often meant to teach something. What is this teaching? I mean, is it teaching having a Clorox, stick on you so that you can, clean yourself? I mean, I don't know.
Make sure you keep your clothes clean. I don't know. So I think some of these were, in many ways, they were just intended to scare or to upset. They may not necessarily have been teaching things. This strikes me as almost being the kind of story that kids would tell each other around a campfire, around a fireplace late at night. There's like, this happened to a friend of mine. It becomes almost the urban legend, of the 19th century or the 18th century. Is like, this happened to the friend of the friend, or my cousin's friend. This happened to her, and you could see like kids trying to scare the crap out of each other, sitting around a small fire on a cold winter night in northern England or something. It has that kind of vibe to it. It's almost, again, it's like a slasher horror film. So
yeah, I mean, you could really see that actually being played out with a lot of different people coming over and her just dispatching all these people one at a time. It's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure there are multiple versions of this as well. This just happens to be the one that some folklorists collected, probably from an old person in some village, and just said, tell me a story here's a story my grandfather used to tell me when he was, he learned when he was a boy, that kind of thing. So,
and Yorkshire is such a nice place too.
Yeah, I lived there for years. I love it. So.
Yeah. I mean, all creatures great and small is set nearby. And come on,
Absolutely.
You can't have stuff like that happen. Joanne thinks that maybe the lesson here is keep your school clothes clean until home.
Sure.
It sounds like it was a nice satin shirt, whatever, and that she, maybe don't wear that.
Yeah. Only wear it on special occasions. Yeah. And it's interesting because clothing appears a lot in these kinds of stories. As I said, there's the Hans Christian Andersen story, The Red Shoes, which is about that. The daughter wants these fancy red shoes and she wears them at inappropriate places like church. And then she ends up getting cursed and can't take them off. And she starts dancing and they won't, and then she has no choice but to have a woodsman or something cut her feet off so that she can actually be free of them. And it's, that's the story. So, yeah. So once again, it's like there's a time and a place for certain things. And if you break that taboo or that thing, then bad things will happen, whether it's clothing, whether it's behavior, there's all those sorts of things.
And I think that's actually a very, very good point because, we live in a time, and this isn't a, where, that the young people are doing stuff they shouldn't sort of, mantra that I'm trying to do, but it's more like we do forget, even as much as say 60 years ago, you could probably even say 40 years ago, there are norms that was expected. And like you just said, there was a time and a place for certain things to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm sure there still is. I just not really, privy to such things. But I mean, it's absolutely right. And how else do you get people to, and especially probably around that period of time, you really want people to fall into suit there. There is no room for not doing so.
Right. Yeah. Rightly or wrongly, I suspect that's behind a lot of these kinds of stories. Yeah. Again, it's a teaching thing in a different way. Yeah.
Incredible. Nancy then also says, I love the warped that was, and I got the evil stepmother vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, it's a similar kind of motif. It's the mother in this case, but it does have that sense, and then it's the father who actually enacts justice on her by killing her in the end. And that often happens even in stepmother stories as well. There are plenty of Grimm stories where that kind of thing happens that aren't just like Cinderella and such. There's a number of other stories where the evil stepmother does something and then the father finds out and ultimately kills the stepmother in revenge for what she did to the children or such. That's a common fairy tale motif.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Well, what I want to do, because I want you to read another one if you got another one for us. In the meantime, though, because I'm not going to try another break here, because what's the point? It's not really working.
It's all me. I'm doing it.
It's you. You must not change focus from me. So I quickly want to I just quickly want to remind folks that we have Twins tickets to give away for tomorrow's game against the Yankees. It's a nighttime game. I think it starts at 6:40 or something like that. I'm giving away tickets. Send me an email, comment at ghostboxradio.com. That's comment at ghostboxradio.com. And let me know that you want tickets, and we'll do our very best for you right there. Also, I just want to say tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun, we're going to have on Suzanne Worthley. And Suzanne and I have been friends for a long time. She is, I truly believe she's from another planet, and I would say that to her face as well, and I have. And we're going to be talking about alien energy tomorrow. It's going to be a really interesting conversation because she knows so much stuff that pretty much all I do is I just sit and listen and enjoy. So you don't want to miss tomorrow, just like you don't want to miss the rest of this. Once again, the book is called The Scary Book of Fairy Tales by author Tim Rayborn. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can go to your local bookshop and order it. Go to GhostBox Book Club, which is on my ghostboxradio.com page. And there you can use the Amazon affiliated link that will net me millions of dollars, quite frankly. That's how well that works, Tim. I didn't know if you knew that if they use that link, I get more money than you had ever made on those books. So
I don't doubt it, actually.
Yeah. So let's do another one. This is really fun. It's really interesting stuff here.
Let me see what else I have in here. Let's again change out my glasses there.
Yeah, I mean that just seems to be really the focus of the show. Is
sure. I mean, these are a little bit different because these are actual stories, whereas the previous couple of books were like stories about things. These are the actual stories themselves.
These are the stories. Yeah.
We have. I tried to grab a few interesting. Oh, I like this one. This is called "The Place Where There Were No Graves" from Egypt.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. This is a good one. See, yeah, we'll do that one. Once there was a man who had a wife he loved deeply. They were happy for many years, but one day she died. The man was distraught and didn't know how he could live without her. He began to wonder if there was a place in the world where no one ever died. If so, could he find it? After he'd spent much time grieving, he resolved to set out to discover if such a place existed. He wandered all over the land, searching and hoping that he might yet find a place where death did not hold everything in its cruel grip, a place where people felt no sorrow at the loss of their loved ones. Was there anywhere in the world that had no graves? One day he wandered into a land to the south and soon found a town that seemed different. He realized that this town indeed had no graves. Could this be what he was searching for? Was it possible that the sting of death did not touch the world here? He didn't dare to hope. He found a local holy man and asked to stay with him. The holy man was very accommodating, telling him not only that he could stay, but he would be able to feast on fine food. That night they settled down at the table, and the holy man offered him a choice piece of roasted leg. But the man looked about, wondering why no one else was there to join them in sharing his meal. "Tell me," he said to the holy man, "where is your father?" The holy man smiled and held up the meat he had just offered. "This is his leg." He pointed to a shelf nearby and said, "The rest of him is up there. Now come and eat with me." The man learned that in this town, whenever someone fell ill or was wounded, they were killed so that they could be eaten. And that was why there were no graves here. Terrified, the man ran out the door and kept on running until he returned to his own country. His gruesome discovery led him to accept death and the normal passing of all things.
Wow.
So yeah, Cannibal Town. Again, another Rob Zombie film here, basically.
Have you ever tried human meat? No, I'm
I
just
have
kidding.
not. I don't eat it anyway. So. And even if I had, would I admit it?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, it's have you ever
I went
had
through my
filet
cannibal phase
mignon?
in my 20s, but
So I mean, is that the purpose of the story, is to accept death?
I think so. It's a combination of the meat taboo, the cannibal taboo, but also I think that death comes to everyone and you can't escape it. And yeah, you have to grieve and move on. And trying to find a place where death doesn't exist is a search in vain. And he finds something more terrible than death, really, which is that these people eat their dead. So yeah.
Well, so it's just I had a thought here, and I think it just left, which is unfortunate, because it's just it's such a I was going to say, I'm going to back up here, that what I think is really interesting about this is, as soon as they said, here, have this leg, and he's eating it, I'm sure when you read it as well, you're like, okay, well, we're going somewhere with the leg. But
yeah, he didn't say have a piece of beef or a chicken leg,
no.
Yeah.
But now, that's us now. But back in the day, people would have been surprised even more so. I mean, it's still shocking, but it would have been like, they wouldn't have even thought that there's something like some kind of like leg that you wouldn't want to eat, sort of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, the cannibalism taboo definitely, is what's brought up here, and then that comes up even in Grimm's fairy tales, the story of Hansel and Gretel. The witch wants to eat the children, so she fattens them up. So there's like that. That's a common theme that runs through things as well. Is the notion of the taboo of eating human flesh. Definitely,
the taboo. Here's the thing though that's interesting about that, and you're absolutely right. I don't think about it, because I take it at face value as, say, a witch, and I'm thinking in the fairy tales, witch not really even being human per se.
Yeah, right.
But you're right. It is a story about possible cannibalism.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. Yeah, mm-hmm. and the ultimate forbidden sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting, and it kind of even is like I mentioned last week on the show, like I don't always put two and two together that something like Christmas Carol is actually a ghost story.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
It was not the only one. The Victorian Christmas ghost was actually a tradition beyond Dickens. There's a number of ghost stories that are quite creepy for a Christmas time that were very popular in Victorian England. So yeah, kind of upturns our concept of what these things were like. And I think the fairy tales do that too. It's like they're meant to be kind of unsettling. They're meant to take you out of your world and be jarring and sort of, and not all of them are. Some of them are very sweet, but a lot of them have this real dark sort of sinister undercurrent to them. Definitely.
Well, and it's really interesting. And Joshua says, and I think this makes a very strong point. Rather than cannibalism, he says that he'd rather eat a chicken nugget. So I'm assuming he means McNugget. Yeah, I mean that's strong words indeed, if you ask me. I want to ask you, kind of off topic a little bit, because the whole thing, and like you said, there's a whole thing about ghost stories for Christmas.
Yeah.
Big BBC kind of anthology series throughout the year.
Yeah,
and whatnot.
They've done those. They're really good.
They are very good. Why do you think? And maybe I'm wrong here. I've never really felt like the ghost story aspect really hit Christmas in the US the way it has in the UK.
Not really, no.
Do you have any thoughts why that might be?
I mean, I think they were popular in Victorian Britain for maybe 40 or 50 years, and then the fad kind of died out, and I think it just never really made its way over here. It wasn't like it was an ancient tradition that had been going on that was brought over by the colonists in the 18th century or something. It kind of arose in the earlier 19th century, and it kind of waned it went from about 1820 to 1880, and it was just like it was a literary fad that then kind of died out. So it just never really crossed the ocean. I think it was really more just as simple as that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, because it's such, and I find it to be, when you think about it and think about how people decorate their homes and stuff during the year, and it's often you have your Christmas lights inside or outside, or whatever, but it's generally surrounded by darkness. It really kind of plays to that as well. I mean,
short nights too, as we talked about in the Christmas thing. Yeah, long nights, short days, cold weather, all of that kind of stuff can play into the imagination sitting around the fire. And again, so many of these stories I think would have been told in those kinds of situations as well at any time of year. Gather around the fire and we'll tell you the story about Hansel and Gretel or about Snow White, and the kids might, listen, wide-eyed in horror, but then after they were done, it would get them all worked up and they'd want to hear it again, so
yeah.
that. Yeah, we love a good scare, and I
Well,
think these were really much, very much intended for that.
and these stories also are trying to tell give a lesson as well, especially Christmas carols, giving a lesson.
Absolutely, yeah, about charity and about forgiveness and all of that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
a lot of deep layers to these. And I said there are people that spend their whole careers, academic careers, studying folk tales and such. It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, you can delve into these for a lifetime. There's so many, and again, you see recurring motifs and stories all around the world. And as you'll find in some of the other stories, I have stories in here from Africa, from Mongolia, from Japan, and they have similar types of ideas in them as well. So it's interesting to kind of see how they resonate, and with people in other countries and other parts of the world.
What the kind of Japanese stories are in there? Because the first thing that comes to my mind is the whole night we've been talking about stories that try to teach a lesson. The Japanese culture being so orderly based. I'm curious to know some examples if you have any for those.
Sure. Let me find it. There was a Japanese story in here. Dear. Of course, I won't be able to find it now. As the clock ticking here. Oh, it's called Botan Doro, the Peony Lantern, and it's a story. It's actually not very long. Why don't I read it? It's a short one.
Okay.
This is from Japan. This is a folktale, a fairy tale from Japan. And as with so much of Japanese folktales, it involves a ghost. Japan is just huge on female ghosts in particular. Is
Sure.
a central part of the. So yes. Let's see. A long time ago, there lived a widowed samurai named Ogiwara Shinojo. On the first night of Obon, a commemoration of the dead, he saw a beautiful woman carrying a peony lantern, accompanied by her young servant. At once, Ogiwara was taken with her, and he approached her. When she told him her name was Otsuyu, he asked if she would visit him in his home. She agreed and came to see him. That night, the two made love, and she stayed with him until just before dawn. Ogiwara was happy when she returned again the following night, with the servant now carrying the same lantern. Otsuyu stayed with him again, and it wasn't long before he fell in love with her. She visited him every night, though she always left just before the light of dawn. Ogiwara lost interest in others and in anything else, staying home all day and waiting for her to arrive each evening. It was all he cared for. He even neglected himself. And so this nightly affair continued for almost 3 weeks. During this time, Ogiwara began to grow weaker with some kind of illness. Ogiwara's friends grew concerned about him. His next-door neighbor, an old and wise man, happened to hear Ogiwara and Otsuyu laughing together one evening. He decided to investigate, and peering through a small hole in Ogiwara's wall, he saw that the man was in the embrace of a skeleton. Otsuyu had no flesh at all, and when she spoke, a terrible voice sounded instead of that of a gentle young woman. The old man spoke to Ogiwara the next day and told him what he had seen. Otsuyu was really a ghost, and Ogiwara needed to go to the nearby temple. He agreed, and once there he found Otsuyu's grave with an old peony lantern set upon it. The priest warned Ogiwara about her and told him that she was draining him of his life force. He gave Ogiwara a charm to set on his front door which would keep her away. Ogiwara did as the priest instructed, and true enough, Otsuyu no longer came to his home. But Ogiwara was unhappy with what he'd done and grew restless. He missed Otsuyu terribly. One night he got drunk and wandered off to the temple to her grave. His friends eventually found him there in the embrace of Otsuyu's skeleton, dead but united with her at last.
One word comes to mind when I think about a lot of Japanese stories, and I'd be interested if you feel like that makes sense. Is there's a delicacy, to the storytelling and to what's happening there. There's heavy things happening in the story, but yet there's still it's all very delicate.
Tragic. There's an element of tragedy to this. Yeah. And this again, it talks about this poor old guy who's lonely, basically, and it's and this ghost decides to drain him of his life force, and he agrees ultimately to give up his life to be with her. So yeah.
And I thank you for reading that, because that's what I totally expected was because there's actually a beauty to it, and there isn't it's not a happy ending that necessarily is one that everyone lives, but it's still a happy ending.
Sure, in its own way, it is kind of strangely. It is,
yeah. Oh, that's great. How wonderful is that? Yeah. Where did you find that?
Oh, it must have been in a book of Japanese folk tales. Yeah, as I say, I do research on these things.
Gosh.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch, and some of them are very, very long. Another trick is like some of these stories are very long, and finding ones that are either short enough or that I can condense to match a book of this size is also part of the trick as well. So I'm certainly talking about choosing things. I'm somewhat limited by that as well. Some of these stories just go on for page after page, and there are things that are like epics. Basically, I found some really interesting ones in China, but they were just so long. There was no way I could reasonably condense them in order to make them fit. So yeah, it's always a concern as well.
Now, is it okay to talk a little bit about the next book coming out here?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
we have about less than a minute, but
in a couple of weeks, I have another book coming out called the Little Dictionary of Dream, Little Dream Dictionary, and it's basically it's 1,000 entries of the strange, surreal, bizarre things you might see in your dreams and what dream analysts think they might mean. So it's a quick, handy way to look up something in alphabetical order. If you dreamed about a green door, what might that mean? It has some pretty strange ones in there as well. So it was a lot of fun researching those. Gets into Jungian stuff and all sorts of really cool things.
And you're gonna come back on and we can talk.
I'd love to. Sure, let's book a time. I'd love to talk about it. Yeah,
well, I love it. Most people don't get a book published in their lifetime. Here you have 2 coming out in a month. And
weird coincidence. It just happened to happen at this time. They were supposed to be several months apart, and then they kind of just got 2 different companies. So 2 different publishers.
Oh, 2 different publishers.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Definitely want to get you on to talk about that. Love Dreams, and I know the audience will love it as well.
Yes.
The book we're talking about here that we're wrapping up with is called The Scary Book of Fairy Tales. Does it make that noise, or is that you?
That was me.
All right. Damn it.
I confess that was actually me. It doesn't do that.
if you buy a book though, you can call him up and Tim will make that sound when you hold the book in front of the
Absolutely.
camera.
You can record it and save it as an MP3 or something if you want.
The Scary Book of Fairy Tales, written by Tim Rayborn. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, or GhostBoxRadio.com, GhostBox Book Club. Tim, this was awesome. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Always love coming on and chatting with you. It's always great fun.
Always love having you come on. Tomorrow we're going to be talking to Suzanne about alien energy, and maybe commercials will be played as well.
I won't be here, so yeah.
Everyone,
I'm going to tune in tomorrow just to see if the commercials work. So yeah.
Everyone have a good night.